A week. 7 torturous days had passed since I first caught that treacherous scent in our bedroom. It wasn't mine. It wasn't his after a long day. It was hers. Suspicion became my constant companion, whispering in my ear, refusing to let go. I couldn't live like this, drowning in doubt, haunted by every lingering touch of his, every absent-minded gaze. I needed proof. So I planned the perfect trap, a gathering, a celebration, a night of friendship and laughter, a chance to toast to life. That's what everyone would believe. But for me, this wasn't just a party. This was a battlefield. I prepared every detail with ruthless precision. When the guests arrived, the house filled with warmth, soft music, clinking glasses, the hum of conversation. But even as I smiled, even as I played the gracious host, my eyes never left Anna and Sebastian. She had arrived with her husband, Carlos. Poor, oblivious Carlos, who had no idea he was drinking and laughing alongside the man who was stealing his wife. But I saw it. I saw every glance Anna exchanged with Sebastian, every brush of their hands, every time he poured her a drink, every time their eyes lingered for just a second too long. It was eating me alive. Then Anna excused herself, slipping away down the hall. Minutes later, Sebastian followed. His study, the room he always called his sanctuary. But now I knew the truth. His sanctuary was where he committed his sins. I moved, my steps heavy, my heart hammering. The sounds of the party faded, drowned by the blood rushing in my ears. I stopped at the door. I didn't need to open it to know what was happening inside, but I wanted to see. I needed to see. There was no turning back now. My trembling hand rested on the doorknob. I heard them. The unmistakable sounds, ragged breaths, the rustle of fabric, stifled moans. Every sound was a blade slicing into me, but I refused to step back. I twisted the handle. It wasn't locked. A small crack formed as I pushed the door open slightly. Through it, I saw everything. Sebastian, my husband, leaning against his desk, his pants pulled around his hips. Anna knelt before him, her dark hair cascading down her back like a waterfall. Her lips wrapped around him with a devotion that should have belonged to me. His head was thrown back, eyes shut, fingers tangled in her hair as he pushed her further, encouraging her. His face contorted with pleasure. A look I hadn't seen in years. A look that wasn't for me. Dizziness washed over me, but I didn't look away. I couldn't. My fingers found my phone in my pocket. A part of me wanted to burst in, to scream, to rip them apart. But another part of me, colder and more calculating, held me back. I wanted proof. I wanted to destroy them, not with accusations, but with undeniable evidence. I lifted my phone, positioned the camera through the crack, and hit record. The images flooded the screen. Sebastian gripping Anna's waist, lifting her onto the desk, thrusting into her with a hunger I had long forgotten. Her moans grew louder, his movements more relentless. I captured it all, every motion, every expression, every sound, a damning testament. Then I saw Sebastian lean down, whisper something into Anna's ear. His voice was low, rough. No one will ever know. I laughed, a quiet, breathless laugh, barely escaping my throat. Oh, they would know. I would make sure of it. I stopped recording. My fingers tightened around my phone, knuckles turning white. The video was saved. Every moan, every touch, every thrust. They were all captured in this small device. Undeniable proof. But what now? I could burst in right now, set everything on fire. I could throw my phone in Sebastian's face, make him see what he had done. I could scream, slap Anna, make a scene that would be remembered forever. But then what? Sebastian would stammer out excuses. Anna would cover her face, pretend to be ashamed, and they would twist the truth, paint me as the crazy, paranoid wife who overreacted. I wasn't that foolish. I took a deep breath, swallowed my rage, and stepped back. I turned away from the door, slipping down the hallway without making a sound. The party was still alive outside. My guests were laughing, drinking, enjoying their evening while I stood here, drowning in betrayal. But I wouldn't let my anger consume me. I had a plan. The phone in my hand was a weapon, and I would wield it the right way. Silently, I stepped into the garden, where a few guests were chatting under the dim glow of the lanterns. I pulled up my messages, selected a contact. Carlos, Anna's husband. 1 second of hesitation. Then I hit send. A 3-minute video, enough to destroy a marriage. Minutes later, I saw Carlos pull away from the crowd. He stood frozen, his face darkening as he stared at his phone. The glow of the screen reflected in his widening eyes, shifting from confusion to pure horror. I knew the exact moment he saw it. I knew what sounds were filling his ears. His entire world had just crumbled. Carlos gripped his phone tightly, then lifted his gaze, scanning the room for Anna. When he saw her stepping back into the party, her hair still slightly disheveled, her face carrying the lingering heat of stolen pleasure, he moved toward her. It had begun. Carlos stormed through the crowd like an oncoming tempest, his eyes burning with the fury of a man betrayed. I stood at a distance, silent, my heartbeat pounding against my ribs. Anna had just returned to the gathering, her lips still curled into a forced smile as she eased into a conversation. But the moment Carlos grabbed her wrist, that smile shattered. "Where were you just now?" His voice was cold, but I could hear the tremor of rage beneath it. Anna flinched, her eyes wide. I just went to the bathroom." Carlos let out a harsh laugh, bitter and cruel. He lifted his phone, the screen still glowing with the paused video. "Really?" Anna's face drained of color. I saw her hand tremble as she reached for the phone, but Carlos was faster. He stepped back, his voice now louder, loud enough that nearby guests began to turn, their conversations halting. "Would you like me to play this for everyone here?" Anna froze. "Carlos, I can explain." "Explain what? How you were on your knees for this bastard?" Carlos spat, his voice raw with pain. The room had gone completely silent, every eye now fixed on the unfolding chaos. I turned to Sebastian. He stood stiff, his jaw clenched, his face drained of all color, as Carlos's burning gaze locked onto him. He knew there was no escape. "Sebastian." Carlos said his name slowly, each syllable like a knife against stone. Sebastian swallowed, then stepped forward, trying to keep his voice steady. "Carlos, this isn't what you think. Crack." Sebastian clutched his face, blood trickling from his lip. He glared up at Carlos, but his eyes weren't filled with anger. They were filled with fear. "You think I haven't known? You think I haven't seen the signs?" Carlos's voice shook with fury as he turned to Anna. "I loved you, Anna. I trusted you. And this is how you repay me." Anna broke into sobs, but her tears did nothing to soften him. I stood there, watching it all unfold, feeling an intoxicating satisfaction seep into my bones. This was what I wanted, to destroy them where they thought they were safest. But this was only the beginning. The sound of shattered glass rang through the silent room, like the final punctuation to a doomed evening. The murmurs grew louder, eyes darting from one person to another, uncertainty thick in the air. Sebastian staggered to his feet, wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. His gaze flickered between Carlos and Anna, searching for a way out. "Carlos!" Anna sobbed, her face streaked with tears. "Please, don't make a scene." Carlos turned sharply, his eyes like steel. "Don't make a scene!" "You just fucked him in our friend's house, while I stood here like an idiot, and you want me to stay quiet?" He lifted his phone, pressed play. The room went deathly still. Anna's moans filled the space, echoing off the walls like a ghostly wail. Someone gasped. A woman shrieked. A wine glass slipped from trembling fingers, crashing onto the floor. Sebastian lunged for the phone, but it was too late. Everyone had heard. Anna's face burned with shame, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Carlos, please!" But Carlos wasn't listening anymore. He looked at her as if she were a stranger. A disgusting, vile stranger. "Don't say my name," he said, his voice a blade of ice. "You died to me the moment I watched that video." Sebastian turned to me then, the first time all night he truly saw me. "Maria," he choked. "You sent the video." I smiled. "What do you think?" His face went pale. He knew there was no way out. I stepped forward slowly, savoring the moment. I looked at him, at Anna, at the guests who stood frozen in the wake of the destruction. Then I reached for the glass of red wine still sitting on the table, and I poured it over Sebastian's head. The liquid ran down his hair, his face, staining his shirt, soaking him in the final mark of disgrace. "Enjoy this moment, Sebastian," I whispered, my voice laced with venom. "Because it's the last time you'll ever stand in this house." I turned, walking away, leaving him and Anna drowning in their humiliation. But I knew this wasn't over. I had destroyed them. But I wanted more. I walked away from the living room, leaving Sebastian and Anna drowning in their humiliation. But I didn't leave the party just yet. Number. I headed straight to the bar, pouring myself a glass of whiskey. I needed to feel the burning liquid scorch my throat, a reminder that I was still here, that I wasn't the same naive wife I had once been. Guests were already slipping out, some pretending not to have witnessed the disaster, others stealing glances at me. Pity? Curiosity? Perhaps even admiration. Did they think I was weak? Did they think I was a victim? I wasn't broken. I raised my glass, took a slow, deliberate sip, then placed it back on the counter with a firm clink. I was done pretending. Sebastian still stood there, his face flushed with shame and barely contained fury. He was probably trying to piece together a way to salvage this, to cling to whatever dignity he had left. But there was nothing left to save. Carlos had disappeared. I assumed he had walked out, unable to bear the sight of Anna a second longer. Anna was still crying. Her desperate tears meant nothing to me. Sebastian took a step toward me, slow and careful, as if walking on thin ice. "Maria?" His voice was hoarse, somewhere between pleading and anger. I tilted my head, waiting. You didn't have to do this." Sebastian clenched his fists. "I know I fucked up, but you didn't have to destroy everything." I stared at him, feeling my pulse thrum in my veins. "No, Sebastian," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "You destroyed everything." His eyes darkened. I saw the desperation flicker behind them, but I no longer cared. I turned my back on him and walked out of the house we once shared. The night wasn't over yet. I had one last thing to do. I walked out of the house, leaving Sebastian and Anna behind to pick up the shattered pieces of their lives. No more laughter, no more music. Just an oppressive silence hanging in the air like a funeral shroud. But I wasn't done yet. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and tapped on a name. Divorce attorney. The phone rang once, twice. "Good evening. How can I help you?" I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in days. "I'd like to begin the divorce process." I hung up. But there was still one last thing. I turned toward the street, where the headlights of a car cut through the darkness. Carlos stood beside it, his face partially obscured by shadows. He was waiting for me. I walked over. He looked at me. His eyes no longer filled with rage, but with quiet understanding. We were both victims of the same betrayal. We had both lost something. "How long have you known?" Carlos asked, his voice rough with pain. "A week," I admitted, when I smelled her perfume in my bedroom. He nodded, looking away, as if trying to swallow down the lingering fury inside him. "I'm sorry you got dragged into this," I said, though I knew the words couldn't undo the damage. Carlos let out a bitter chuckle, shaking his head. "Don't be sorry. At least now I know the truth." We stood there, silent, sharing an unspoken moment of understanding. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I had taken back control of my life. I turned away, stepping onto the street, leaving that house behind like a ghost of the past. Tonight I didn't lose a husband. I freed myself,